Last week I came across some of Mum's old notes from when she did the keynote speech for the International Federation of Aromatherapists down in London, and she presented on how she'd been using Cajeput essential oil for psoriasis and the incredible results she got treating hundreds of men across Glasgow after the Sellafield disaster. And it got me thinking about the spiritual benefits of Cajeput essential oil. So I collated and I wanted to look at all the different sources to see if we could see what was going on behind what was going on in the skin. So if you haven't met me before, my name is Elizabeth Ashley. I am a clinical aromatherapist, an author and an educator, and I am fascinated in the spiritual aspects of essential oils. And so if that's the sort of thing you're interested in, don't forget to click like and subscribe. And today, as I say, Cajeput. Now, there's not very much written about Cajeput essential oil. If it's one that you don't know that much about, it's usually found in Malaysia or Indonesia. Sometimes it's called punk tea tree, which I really like. It's the same family, Melaleuca family, and it's from the myrtle family, all of which have tremendous antibiotic aspects. But more than that, excuse me, licking my thumb to turn my notes over. More than that, it's very, very useful when the spirit feels overwhelmed or flattened. And so in the context of this video, we'll be talking about the spirit, not necessarily in a religious capacity, but when the spirit has been crushed. And its name is a Malaysian name. Kayu means tree and puti means white. And that refers to the white bark of the tree. And the energetic aspects of Cajeput are how it really strengthens chi through the body, the vital life force of the body. It tonifies yang. So if you think about yin and yang, yin is the passive, receptive aspect. Yang is the fight, the active constituent, how things move forward and become dynamic. And so this is a really useful oil to use if you have found that you've got no fight left, really. I'll talk about that in the capacity of these gentlemen I was talking about. We tend to use it in times when there's like mental fatigue, if you feel lethargic, if you feel confused, can't focus. Very good for focusing the attention, for concentration, for study. But more it's about, I feel like life has really kicked me hard and I don't know how to get up. Cajeput goes, I know how, and pulls you up. I always think, if you think about it in terms of seasons, I would say that this is when winter turns to spring. And so at the beginning you have like a phase that you can't see, and then suddenly you notice, wow, there's bees everywhere, there's butterflies everywhere, the trees have gone green, the roses have suddenly gone pew. That is this spring energy, the wood energy. If you look in Salvatore Battaglia, he talks about how it's kind of got a metal aspect to it and a water aspect. So water tends to be the emotions, and metal is the thoughts, clarity of thought, being able to make incisive decisions, being clear in what you're thinking about. And Valerie Ann Warwood, I found some very small amount of notes in her Fragrant Heavens, and she talks about how she uses it to seal the aura. So any kind of holes in the aura. And there's a few different oils that I use. I wouldn't have thought of using this oil, so I experimented and I was like, okay, this really makes sense to me. How you kind of put the plug in the bath and the water comes up, put the plug in the bath, plug the aura, and suddenly the yang energy, the chi can, or kundalini, depending on which way you're looking at it, this life force is able to come up again. So very interesting. Sorry about the whole licking something. So this is, so remember, it's tonifying yang and strengthening Shen. So let's talk a little bit about this Glasgow story. So people would come up to the stall. Mum's stall was an enormous stall. She did 140 different products for different conditions. And back then we were allowed to put psoriasis on the jars. You wouldn't be able to say that now. They'd say, no, it's a medical claim, but you could back then. And so these men would come up, and the Sellafield disaster, what had happened was one of the central cores had exploded, and it was a nuclear reactor. And so all across Glasgow, not only was the quality of the air very poor, but the jobs had gone. And there was no money in the economy. So if they'd lost their jobs at the power station, there still wasn't any jobs anywhere else. And so not only did they have this awful skin because they'd been close to what had happened, but their spirits were completely crushed. And they would come up to the stall and they'd go, never seen anything like that, have you? I can't do a Scottish accent, but it doesn't sound like that. Never seen anything like that, have you? No, it's not getting any better. And they'd be very proud of this scaly skin, which honestly was so thick it was like a rhino's cracked skin. And they'd be like, we'd go, well, and we'd give them a pot of cream and we'd say, this oil contains, this cream is like a wax base. It contains an oil called Cajeput oil, which is the one that treats the psoriasis. We blend it with lavender and chamomile to soothe the itching and the soreness and to condition the skin, and then a little bit of myrrh to heal over where it cracks and abrasions. And it would be a very wax. We used to use it, made it from something called Lannette wax. So it was a thick wax base, and it would just take ages to go in because their skin was so dry. And they go, thanks, off they go. And you'd think, okay, well, that's going nowhere. Then about 20 minutes later, their wife would come back and they'd shove 20 quid at you, go, well, I'll have a pot of that. And off they'd go. And it would never be the men, because the men, I think, didn't want you to fix it because there was nothing special about them in their lives except this condition. They began to identify with somebody who had this awful skin, but we sold so many pots of cream to the wives. So that in itself was a story. But then the next part of the story came about 6 weeks later, where they wanted repeat pots. And the orders came through. Quite often you just have, like, you know, a check and the thing saying, we want to order another pot of that, please. But the letters were really detailed about the difference they could see in their husbands. That he seemed more happy, he was more talkative, he seemed to be able to have more hope to go and find a job, not so moody anymore. And they, even though we had said nothing about it, seemed to associate that change in the spiritual aspect of the person with the pot of cream that they were using. And, you know, over the years, they carried on using it. And, of course, the problem with being an aromatherapist, a good aromatherapist, is people get better. So you would see pictures. They would often send you pictures, and things that had gone from being like that big across gradually got smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. But they would come back and say, what else have you got? What else can we have? And these were amazing customers. After we'd managed the situation with the psoriasis, we did all sorts of lovely skin moisturizers and beauty stuff, and these women became lifelong customers. I really think that it was the aspect of the Cajeput, of how it restored the spirit, helped them to think more clearly, how to be more decisive in their actions, and also how it just, I mean, goodness knows what nuclear energy radiation does to one's aura, but clearly Warwood's notes were correct, that somehow it had healed the aura and given it an opportunity to be fortified, and for the person to get better. So those are my notes on Cajeput essential oil. If you've got a pot with you, perhaps you would like to come on this guided meditation that I've done and feel the difference in yourself. Perhaps you would like to note down some of the challenges you're feeling, and as we do the meditation, how you come to feel different through them. So I'll link that for you. But there we go. That is the end of my video on the spiritual aspects. Cajeput essential oil spiritual benefits. Don't forget the meditation.